Thank you everyone for attending today's Tech Talks session. Today we're going to be looking at the design of online quizzes and activities for asynchronous delivery. So first and foremost, I'd like to talk a little bit about the key benefits of quizzes and activities and why we have them. So it creates a space of informal formative assessment for the student. And that's really crucial because it provides students with feedback on the progress that they've made. And it really highlights key areas for further development or reading for the student. Now to share, excuse me, to share a practical example of where this has worked for me. In my younger years, which feels like a very long time ago right now, I was very keen to pass my driving test very early. So keen, in fact, that when I was able to, I booked my theory test with 3 days available to me to prepare to take that test. Now, DVLA at the time provided the highway code on a disk. I hadn't prepared, so I hadn't been reading the highway code for years. So it was literally that 3 days to prepare. So what I did was I took the disc. The first thing I did was I took their quiz. The DVLA have prepared huge question banks of hundreds of questions for each and every topic within the highway code. So I took the test and then I focused on my 2 weakest areas. And I read those areas cover to cover. And I took the test again. Now, over the 3-day period, I saw that my weakest areas were now improving. And it got to the point where at the end of the 3 days, I was scoring 100% on each of the key areas. And then, of course, I passed the theory test first time. So I was over the moon. But that really highlights the importance of having some type of informal formative assessment for our students to really give them ownership of their own progression, of their own development, and that opportunity for them to assess themselves. Now, some colleagues that I work with like to develop quizzes and activities, and they will timetable those sessions. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. That's absolutely fine. However, how about we use a bit more of a blended approach? So for timetable sessions, we use them to have discussions with the experts, of course. So our lecturers, our module leads are the experts on the programs that they're delivering. So really, let's use those opportunities for discussions where students can come with any questions that they have. And then this material is really an extra resource for our students to benefit from. And in all honesty, it really does work. Now, looking at quizzes, there were kind of 3 main types of quizzes that are available within our toolkit. So we can create multiple choice questions with either a multiple answer option or a single answer option. We can create true or false questions. They can, of course, be yes or no questions, or we can word the options differently, but essentially there are 2 answer options available to students. To make quizzes a little more interactive and a little more relevant, we can create quizzes with text or imagery. So for example, if a specific quiz question is asking students about, let's say, for example, a piece of equipment, and we're asking them to name different pieces of equipment, we can include imagery of that equipment, just to really reinforce that learning for the student. When it comes to writing a quiz now, the quiz question, there's a lot of information on the slide. I won't go through it all, but for the purposes of communicating from a subject matter expert to the person who is developing the quiz, there's some key criteria that we need to communicate over. So essentially the question and the question type, the correct answer options, the distractor answer options, so the answers that we're including which aren't correct, the pass mark, and then the feedback. Now, feedback tends to get ignored when we're developing quiz questions. We tend to provide a correct answer. If students have been given more than one attempt, there'll be a try again message if they get the answer wrong the first or second time. And then eventually, if they've completed all their attempts, there'll be some form of incorrect answer feedback. But these tend to be very generic. And just as I've highlighted in bold on the right of the slide, there'll be, you've got your answer correct, please try again, or you've got this incorrect. We can really go beyond that and use quizzes as as a tool for teaching, essentially. So we do have the freedom within the technologies that we use to create quizzes to add additional feedback. So if they've got the answer incorrect, how about some additional information as to why that answer is incorrect? We could provide perhaps a URL to a pre-prepared video, which provides some explanation around why the correct answers are the correct answers, etc. And just really to clarify that thought process of the student, to provide some additional teaching, essentially. Now, the first of our activities I'd like to highlight are branching scenarios. Branching scenarios are a really cool activity. I enjoy them. So it allows learners to make choices that determine the content that they see next. So as they read through learning material or watch videos, whatever we're providing, they then ask the question. Based on what they select, they'll then follow a different path. Now, this can be based on real case studies, real scenarios, and it really tests the students' understanding of the material, and it looks at their decision making. And I think that's really crucial when we're teaching our students. We really want to empower our students to be able to make the correct decisions, and we want to give them some rationale around why that's the correct decision and why that's perhaps an incorrect decision and what they could do differently the next time. And personally, I think that's crucial when we're working with medical doctors who are practicing. Taking the branching scenario further, we could perhaps highlight a doctor-patient conversation or a teacher-student conversation and really look at real-life case studies, taking the student through step by step each of the crucial pieces of information that they need to assess, and then looking at how they're assessing that information and the decisions that they're making all the way through. And then, of course, in providing feedback, we're providing that guidance to them to say, this is what you perhaps could have done. Now, as this is a piece of asynchronous delivery, students will have access to these materials all year long. They can go back and revisit anytime. There are no restrictions in time. There are no restrictions in how many times they can go over this material. So essentially, as a subject matter expert, you're giving students access to your thinking and your rationale 24/7, around the clock. Now, drag and drop activities are really useful in that they can be used for matching exercises where we want to match perhaps a descriptor to a correct answer, or we can use them to set up a timeline or ordering of event scenario. Now, with drag and drop activities, we can use imagery and we can also use text as the elements within that activity. Image hotspots, this is something that I have covered previously. This is one of my favorite slides, so you may see it on further Tech Talk sessions. So in this scenario, we have the heart and we have the lungs. What a student would typically be asked to do in a hotspot exercise is to select on the heart, and then a pop-up will come up with either text, imagery, or video, providing some teaching content. Now we can then go a step further in that this teaching activity can then be used as an assessing activity. So you could have a breakdown of the heart, of the lungs, and then we're asking students to drag and drop those items into the correct position. So again, this can be used for anatomy. It could also be used for a piece of medical equipment where we have different parts of that piece of medical equipment, and we're asking students to identify the parts and assemble them correctly. Now, before I move over to questions, I'd just like to show some examples of these quizzes and activities that have been developed. So what you see now on screen is an articulate storyline package. So we have the human heart, and this is a hotspot activity. So what we're asking the students to do is simply select the different sections of the heart, and then we're providing explanation as to what that section is called, what it is, and what it does. Now, this is something very basic that I developed just by using Google, by researching the different sections of the heart. But with the expertise that we have at the college, we can really take this a step further. So we can include visual tutorials, we can break this up further into separate quizzes about each section of the heart. It's really essentially limitless in terms of the content and the material that we can provide in allowing our students those opportunities for learning and development in an asynchronous manner. Now, if I just go back, there's some more examples that I'll go through. So we have quizzes here. So if I select onto the quizzes, that's just a little explanation as to what we can do with quizzes. These resources are available online in Blackboard. If anyone would like to have access, please let me know. Just drop me an email and I'll provide you with access to them. So we have a simple pick one true or false question. Don't know how I got that correct. That was just a fluke. Got that one incorrect. And then here we have a multiple answer, but instead of text, we've used imagery. So this question could be, as the images show, related to a science experiment. So we have different people doing different things. So we're asking students to make selections. And then the feedback is immediate. So if I go up here, we can then see the menu. So I can select any of the other scenarios that are included within this example. I won't go through them all now, but as I said, please drop me an email and I can give you access to the resources that are available. I'd now like to open up to any questions.
Thanks for that, Zuba.
No problem.
That was really interesting. One of the questions I always think about is what's the process, and I think the process for doing this kind of thing, because this is a partnership between you and someone who knows their stuff, isn't it? And I'm just interested in how you get started. You know, how does the discussion start, and how do you ensure you're both on the same page and aware of the potential?
Absolutely. So my strategy since joining the college, the first step was to create a learning resources area in Blackboard. So the examples that I just showed you are available within that area. And it's been a matter of giving everyone access to that area so they can start really playing around with what's available and essentially learning about what our options are. I think when we have conversations about e-learning, if you've never been involved before, it's very theoretical. So the first challenge is to move away from theoretical conversations about this is what we can potentially do to really practical demonstrations around this is what we can do, this is what is available, and increasing those opportunities just to allow people to play around with the tools. The session I'll be just looking at next month is really looking at roles, responsibilities, and how we bring that team and those people together and formulate some form of practical process in getting the design and development mechanism moving. And like I said, it really is a collaborative process. So it's about understanding, for me personally, timeframes, how long things realistically take to achieve, the key pieces of information that are needed. For example, if I'm writing a quiz, if I'm developing a quiz, there are some essential pieces of information that I need to be able to create that quiz. And again, the resources are available within Blackboard and they've been up there since 2020. So it is really making those resources available and then having as many of those one-to-one conversations as possible where we can discuss practical steps in creating these elements.
I think that's interesting because I think the that discussion is so important, isn't it? Because I'm thinking about the like the concept of a session, you know, like a and with the online / blended program I'm doing in surgical education, it's we had to have a common language right from the start, and it was, you know, what is a session? What are the dynamics of a session going to be? How much deviance can you have from one session to another? There's like common design elements, etc. But also, you can't just sit there and be sent content and create a quiz, can you? Because what you need to understand is how does this relate to what's gone before and what's gone after, and what's the student experience going to be outside beyond the quiz, you know, as a whole, which is like there's no shortcut, is there? You've just got to put the work in.
Yeah, I mean, especially with the branching scenario, if we're setting up a branching scenario, it's crucial to understand what's the purpose of that conversation. And for me, I'd really want to understand how that conversation occurs in real time, where students would traditionally struggle and what elements of information they would struggle to understand during that conversation. And this is where collaboration works, and it's why technical people like ourselves work with the subject matter experts, and it can be fantastic when we do get it right. Again, one of the resources that I've developed are templates for writing quizzes and activities. So it really highlights the key pieces of information that are required to create that. But I mean, it's not a matter of setting up a self-serve area and then expecting colleagues to just fill in those templates and send them through. That doesn't work. What's also quite difficult is when we have a meeting and the meeting's very theoretical. So we'll have colleagues saying to us, I want to create a quiz, I want to create a drag and drop activity. How long is it going to take? I mean, if I said right now, how long is this piece of string that I'm holding down here? You need to see the string to know how long it is. So essentially what I prefer to do is have a design meeting with colleagues where we can look at the actual content. I can have an opportunity to read through the content before the design meeting. And then we can really get down to it in that meeting. And I can perhaps showcase or demonstrate the use of one of our tools in creating a quiz question, for example. So then that gives our colleagues an understanding of how long something would take, how to go about it. It also allows us the opportunity to learn the material because, of course, we're not the doctors. We know the tools, we know how to apply the tools, but we really need to collaborate in terms of making the resource happen.
There is a formula for working out how long a branching exercise is going to take, and that is however long anything else takes multiplied by 10,000, isn't it? Because it is one of those things where if you give someone the experience of doing a branching exercise, they think, oh yeah, that was pretty good. Actually, behind the scenes, there is so much work involved, aren't there? Because there's so many little bits of text and imagery, whatever, to put in that they'll never see because they just haven't
Yeah,
gone that route.
In my previous role before joining the college, I worked on developing the UK bar into an online course essentially. So it's the first time in the history of the bar that it's ever been attempted. Well, it'd been attempted twice before and failed twice previously. We actually attempted and delivered. So it's absolutely fantastic. It launched 2 years ago. And there was a lot of work that went into the background. So branching scenarios was very important to that course because there's very specific conversations that trainee barristers have throughout their pupillage. So we really refined the script, and it was a team of people working on the script initially. We then brought in professional actors to act out, and we recorded in each scene. And then, yeah, we pulled in all the video clips. We added quiz questions and different branching points, and it worked really well. But it does
Excellent.
take a very long time to create something to that standard. So I would say easily 3 months of regular conversations initially when you're planning and preparing. And then we could easily be looking at a further 6 to 8 months to actually create something like that. But then the results are fantastic. And again, it's a resource that we can use again and again every year.
Yeah.
It's
And you can
available
go
to students.
through it and play devil's advocate, can't you? You can make all the wrong decisions and see what the consequences are.
Exactly.
But it's definitely not for the faint-hearted, is it?
But
That sounds like a really good example.
when it's there, it's there. So I think it is about working proactively, putting in the time that's needed to create a great piece of content. So one of the things I'm really trying to champion at the moment is just to get people to start thinking a year ahead. So a bit of kind of my project management background coming into play there. So kind of work on what the actual concept is. Now let's take our time, let's discuss it, and let's develop the best resource or product that we can, because essentially these are products that we're creating because our students are our customers. And I think it really works if we think of it that way.
It's brilliant. Thanks for sharing today. I really enjoyed
No
that too.
problem. Are there any more questions? Okay, I think if there are no more questions, we can leave it there for today. But please do email me through any requests. If you want access to our resources area in Blackboard, I'm more than happy to share that. The Tech Talk sessions for next month will be advertised soon. One of those sessions will be looking at how we go around developing a process that works and looking at each of the key roles and responsibilities within the team in developing online content.